Thank you for joining the Ones Changing the World, India's first Future Tech meets Sustainability podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Evelyn. Today, I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Rajshekar Reddy, who is an AR/VR research engineer at Intuitive, which is a leader in minimally invasive care and the pioneer of robotic assisted surgery. He's a computer scientist, augmented reality evangelist, and a transhumanist. His research lies at the intersection of human-computer interaction, visual computing, and neurotechnologies. The topic of discussion today is going to be XR in healthcare, XR interactions, brain-computer interface, neurotechnology, and his master's thesis titled Towards an Eye-Brain-Computer Interface, combining gaze with the stimulus preceding negativity for target selections in XR. So Raj, really appreciate you taking time being part of the podcast. Why don't we start with a small brief introduction, your background, journey in the field of XR and neurotechnologies?
First of all, thanks for having me on this podcast, Eddie. So I first got into XR during my final year of my undergraduate degree. Most of my undergraduate degree, I was not even into, I did my degree in information science, which is similar to computer science. And most of that time, I was not even into programming or into the degree I was actually doing until I actually came across this AR/VR demo. This was actually by Leap Motion's Project North Star. The demo was this was a in-headset recording. He puts up his hand and there are these three virtual buttons coming out of the hand. It was like a virtual wearable. You could press those buttons and something would happen. I thought that demo was really cool, I saw that and I was like, wow, this is the future. And yeah, that's what started my XR journey. It was a video I saw online. And yeah, I started getting into it. I started learning Unity. I started learning back then it was Vuforia. That was the major SDK. I started building these demo applications like those. You've seen the newspapers in Harry Potter, right? The video starts moving. It's not a static image. So I started building that. You put the phone on top of the newspaper and the image starts playing as a video. Since after that, I started getting into more of the research side of things. I wanted to work on the frontier of XR, push the boundary of where XR is and where human-computer interaction is. So after my undergraduate degree, I joined the Indian Institute of Science at the i3D lab. So there, under the mentorship of Dr. Pradipta Biswas, I worked on many cool projects, many gaze interaction projects, VR projects. We had a lot of industry collaborations with ADA, the Aeronautical Development Agency. We also had some collaborations with ISRO. I got some really cool research experience over there and was able to author some papers. And that really helped my profile when I applied for my master's degree at University of Colorado in Boulder. So then I moved to the US to do my master's degree in computer science. So yeah, by now I'm fully into CS, if I forgot to mention that. And then I started doing my research and what I realized was I realized all these interaction techniques that exist for AR are they're not that great. There's hand tracking, but they require some sort of effort from the user. And I was really inspired by science fiction. I watched a lot of science fiction growing up, and I was like, why can't we just communicate our intent directly to this computer without having us to do anything? So that's where I realized that only BCIs can do this, and it's the perfect interaction medium for XR. And yeah, that's where my research started going into BCI.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing your journey, Raj. Yeah, so I think, yes, XR is such a fantastic technology. I think it's going to take us into this world where obviously in this far off future where it'll be difficult for us to kind of distinguish between what is virtual and what is real. We kind of figuring out the early days of what XR can do. And even now, I mean, right, it has quite a lot of issues with interactions, but it's like you said, I mean, with these tech which is converging, with XR meeting brain computer interfaces, possibly we won't even need these controllers. We'll be able to control things and be in spaces with or intent. So exciting space. Would want to
Yeah.
get into that, but I think let's start with healthcare. You've been part of Intuitive,
Okay.
and Intuitive is in the leaders. When it comes to robotic assisted surgery, it will be great if you could kind
That's
of
good.
give a brief overview about Intuitive, and how is Intuitive playing a role in advancing the healthcare tech stack.
Yeah, as you said, Intuitive is the pioneer of RAS, or robotic assisted surgery. We were one of the I think we were the first to come up with the robot, surgical robot, the Da Vinci. And I'm sure like many people have heard of the Da Vinci surgical robot and seen it everywhere. It's placed, we have like at the end of December 22, we have around 6,800 systems placed globally. So it's all over the world. I think we have totally done about 12 million procedures. This was by the end of 2022, so it's much more than that by now. We just recently launched the Da Vinci 5, which is our latest surgical robot, and it comes with force feedback. So this is something that surgeons have been asking for, that they can feel the tissue that they're operate on. And yeah, we delivered that. The latest DaVinci 5 has force feedback, which I think is really cool and which will advance minimally invasive care even more. So the whole idea behind Intuitive is to make minimally invasive care more prominent. Like back in the old days, there used to be this open surgery way of operating where you cut open and you operate directly with your hands. And the issue is with that is, since you're cutting open the body, you need to make pretty large incision, and there's more blood loss. There's more recovery time needed for surgery, and there's also like chances of re admits happening if there's any complications that happen. So that sort of transitioned into laparoscopic surgery, where you use a camera to see inside, and you use these long instruments which you operate with your hands. And then Intuitive came along and introduced robotic assisted surgery, where you can see what's happening through this stereoscopic viewer. We call that the surgeon console, where the surgeon sits and operates on the patient by looking through the stereoscopic immersive viewer. So yeah, that's the way that Intuitive has been advancing minimally invasive surgery, and there's a lot more exciting things to come.
Right. Yeah, I think we are moving fast from the science fiction to a reality, because you used to see these robotic assisted surgeries in these Hollywood flicks, but now I think we're not just going towards robotic assisted surgeries where there is like a some obviously it's at the back, maybe there's a human which is kind of controlling those things, but I'm sure in the next few decades, the rate of these
Mhm.
new papers coming up, and there are companies who are working on general purpose robots. I'm sure we'll also have these robots who will be possibly be surgeons, and who will do
Yeah.
these minimally invasive surgeries with precision. So I think like really really exciting times now with these robotic surgeries. I mean, Intuitive is also looking at AR VR, leveraging augmented reality and virtual reality with through the surgery. Can you talk about some of the applications on how Intuitive and you guys have leveraged AR VR in the field of surgery and healthcare?
First, as I mentioned, the surgeon console. So it already has like VR sort of inherently built into it. Like when the surgeon sits at the console and sees the endoscope feed, they're not looking at a 2D monitor. They're looking inside the like a binoculars. They're looking inside the stereoscopic viewer, and they're looking at this immersive capture of what the endoscope is seeing. And the endoscope is a stereo camera, and you're sort of getting this depth effect in the surgeon console. So like yeah, it like I guess you could say that's sort of a virtual reality happening there. And but we also have like other AR VR projects that we work on. One of them is as my manager gave a talk about this. My manager's go and he gave a talk about this at AWD about Project Arctic, which is a self-led AR training application, which was built on the HoloLens 2. So right now, like robotic surgery is still a new thing, and when you put a robot in a new hospital, you have to train the staff, the OR staff, how do you operate this robot, how to set it up, how to prep it before the surgeon comes in to do the surgery. And before, how this was happening was you needed to send intuitive people out there, and like sort of you need to the like someone should go there and teach them how to set up the robot and like show them how to operate the robot and all those nitty-gritty details. But the idea was through Arctic, you can use the self-led AR training application. You just put on the HoloLens 2, and the application will walk you through the self-led training modules on how to use the robot, what each button press does, if you want it, how to set it up. So there, how to put on the endoscope, how to attach the one of the robot arm to the port. So there are a lot of things in there. So I think it's very exciting that like someone can just put on the headset and go through this whole training exercise without someone else having to come there and teach them how to use the robot. And the application also uses these AR overlays. Like it, what do you say? Like if there's a button in on the robot, you can see an AR overlay on the button itself. So like it's asking you to press the specific button. So it's not like there's a picture of the robot on the side and it's asking you to press the button on the picture, but it's asking there's an overlay on the real world button. So I think that was pretty cool. And the robot actually communicates with the AR application. Like it's sending out data, kinematic data to the AR application. So the AR app knows what the state of the robot is, like where each of the arms are, where the exact button is. So if we were to move that button of the robot in 3D space in your real world, then that AR overlay moves with the button. And that's because of the kinematic data being communicated to the application. So I think it's a really cool idea of leveraging XR in healthcare and robotic assisted surgery.
Right. I think we like again, I'm just going to point this out that we're seeing the early days of this convergence of technologies with robotic assisted surgeries with XR, and currently it's being used in training largely, but I'm sure there'll be like more inroads which will be made soon in the space of surgery and therapy itself. There are lots of companies who are actively leveraging virtual reality in the space of not just training but also in therapy. Now spatial computing, Apple Vision Pro, since the time they launched, I think the world's gone bonkers. I've seen these images of people skiing with AV Pro, driving with AV Pro in subways, in restaurants and malls.
I saw one guy taking a shower with the AV Pro on.
Yeah, insane. But you know what? I mean, what I like it. I think obviously, I mean, it's still far away from going mainstream because the fact remains that these $3,500 headset, but there are other companies also besides AV Pro. I think Quest 3 is doing such a fantastic job, and there's so many other companies who are kind of pushing the conversation of these mixed reality headsets, where the future will be where we'll possibly transition from carrying technology to wearing technologies, and where your phones and the computers will be crammed into a single head wearable devices where the entire world is going to be your screen. You won't need your phone, you won't need your screen. So it's an exciting space. but also a scary world. And I mean, but I think, for forever we say about, whatever new technology, when it comes in, we tend to kind of think that's scary, but eventually I think we all adopt it in a beautiful way, because who would have thought that we would have been we'd be glued to or phones, which is a computer in a pocket, and I'm sure the same thing's going to happen with these head wearable devices, and possibly we'll be all staring out into the future, into the
Yeah.
like spaces where everything
Right.
is a screen. When
Yeah.
we
Well, at
get
least, yeah. Well, at least you'll be looking up and not looking down at your smartphone, and you're at least aware of your surroundings. That's what I see.
no, fair
Yeah.
enough, so yes, I think every tech stack brings with us some some a tool to kind of take us collectively forward, and takes us collectively behind also, because we lose those cognitive capabilities, because
Yeah.
the simplification of technology also, when it becomes mainstream, then we kind of, because the calculator, made us weak in maths. Phones made us weak with, like finding out places, because the GPS kind of, you don't
Yeah.
get down, because earlier, when you're traveling, without GPS, you would get down, ask people. But right now we've
Yeah.
lost the art of, finding things, so I think every technology has
Yeah.
got its pros and cons. So coming to my point, where the entire world becomes a screen with these head wearable devices, which I believe is going to happen in maybe like this decade itself, because we're going to have possibly head wearable devices that light as this, because technologies are becoming, it's on a miniaturization spree. And so I'm sure that these bulky AV Pro right now could go as small as this, and maybe the lens, which we're already seeing, with various companies working towards in AR lenses. But when the world becomes a screen, what is going to be the impact on the human computer interface or interactions? Will be great if you could, I mean, share your thoughts on that.
Action is when the world becomes your screen. I think like your computer is like it's a part of you now. So it's gonna be you're gonna have it every time, like all the time. It's like you're wearing it all the time. It's a part of you, and yeah, it's the communicating with it's gonna be super easy. In terms of the HCI, how the HCI is gonna change things. I think I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, how the HCI might impact it. Because I think a lot of it's gonna remain the same. Like what we see with the Apple Vision Pro now is just gonna be better. It's gonna be more immersive. It's not gonna be like this heavy thing sitting on your face, so you're more inclined to use it. And there also could be like darker things, darker side to it. Like I don't know if you watched this Black Mirror episode where like the you can just blur out things like that you don't like. Like I think yeah that could be a real possibility because now that these glasses are like part of you and the field of view is great and you're wearing it all the time. But yeah, I think like whatever you see now, like these uh 2D applications, like placing virtual monitors everywhere, like there's certainly going to be like 3D aspects to it. I think all those will be like given a boost.
Right. Yeah, there's so much conversion which is happening. Earlier things were in a linear space, and now that that there is this generative AI stack is kind of coming, it's converging. We doing tech which is has been completely democratized. Who would have thought that everyone would be tinkering around with code, because everybody has become a techie of sorts, and that's
Yeah,
because the democratization of the artificial intelligence through these large language model. Now anybody and everybody sitting at home has become a designer. You text to your image, text to 3D. Everybody's become a gamer. Text to world building, and so I think like fantastic things happening. We've gone a little bit to the future, but maybe like coming back to the present. AV Pro is doing some exciting things, and I'm sure there's others who are going to follow. how are these interactions going to change? Because I'd seen some note about Sterling Crispin, who was part of Apple Vision Pro, and who was part of the Neurotech
Yeah.
division, is built out most of the its eye tracking and things like that. Will be great if you could talk about, I mean, how is this gonna evolve in the next coming years? I mean, these interaction tools, with these us
Right.
moving from your phone to head wearable devices. What are all those interactions that we gonna be using for creating an optimal user experience in the context of obviously XR technologies?
Right. So I think there's going to be a lot of leveraging of biosignals in future interactions, because like these things are attached to you, right? And they can measure things. They're already measuring they're already measuring your eye movements. And I think there's a lot more happening there than just like where your eyes are looking. They can see they can measure your pupil diameter. They can measure and these eye trackers, especially on the Apple Vision Pro, I think they have a really crazy sampling rate than the other eye trackers I've played with in XR headsets. So they can measure like really, really tiny eye movements, and they can characterize these really tiny eye movements. And that's going to inform a lot about what the user is thinking, what is the user's cognitive load. Like you can, so in I can give you a brief introduction. In eye movements, there's something called as fixations and saccades. So a fixation is when you're looking at something that when you're looking at something and you're trying to gather information of it. And a saccade is when you jump from one fixation to another fixation. It's that swift dart of your eye. Like when you're reading a sentence, you're fixating from one word to the next. So that the saccade is the jumps between each of those fixations. So if you can measure those, and I think the Apple Vision Pro eye trackers definitely can measure those, you can infer the user's cognitive load, like how much time did they fixate on this, like what was the number of fixations. And research has said that like cognitive load, if the number of fixations, the number of saccades increases, the user's cognitive load also increases. So there are all these like different parameters informing the user's cognitive state. I think all of those are going to go and drive the interactions. And you can also definitely infer intent from these signals. There are papers that have inferred intent just by gaze signals alone, like with nothing else. Like when you look at something, you can infer whether they wanted to select it or not select it. And they built like machine learning models using feature sets like saccade velocity. That is like, so if your eyes landed on a button that you wanted to select, like how fast was that saccade? How fast did it land on that button uh, from wherever else it was looking? And that velocity number can inform whether you wanted to select that button or not. And this velocity is angular velocity. It's measured in degrees per second. And also there are other features, saccade velocity, fixation duration. What was your pupil diameter when you saw this button? And like they obviously like collect all this data and build like a big model which can inform this. Yeah, and you spoke about Sterling Crispin. Like he also had this post on X about like Apple. Actually Apple has a patent about this, like of them trying to infer user intent from the pupil diameter itself. Like when you look at a button, if your pupil was dilated in a certain way, that means you wanted to select a button, and if it was dilated like another way, that means you'd not want to select that button. And I think these are all going to drive interactions going forward. Uh, yeah, like inferring intent without the user explicitly having to do anything. I think that's gonna be like it's gonna be like magic, and it's gonna be the future of like just interacting with computers, not just not I mean it could be XR, it could be anything.
Sometimes I worry because or Web 2.0 and has through maybe the phones that we use, even that captures so much data, and
Yeah.
this data sometimes get manipulated, in ways where you are nudging. the user to do a
Yeah.
certain thing, and the user doesn't have a clue that he or she is being nudged by the data that's been collected, and the data kind of through that data they you know push out a certain notifications or certain ads basis on which you end up purchasing things or doing things, maybe voting a certain party and so on and so forth. So and these were very rudimentary data collection and manipulation, through those data. Now with these head wearable devices where you have these cameras, inside out cameras, which captures everything,
Right.
your eye, not just your eye, where exactly you're looking, what exactly you're looking, and exactly what I was saying, earlier, that when the whole world becomes a screen where you transition from carrying technology to wearing technology, the the data that's going to get captured is going to be insane. And this is possibly the tip of the iceberg, because there are companies who are working on building these HMDs with EEG devices. And obviously, I mean, it's going to kind of like scale up from there, where you spoke about Black Mirror. Sometimes I feel the Black Mirror is sort of a documentary of sorts, because it kind of gives you an exact kind of visual depiction of what's coming,
Yeah.
and so for the technologists who are there in the space, or the dreamers, or the writers, they know that these things are coming. So sometimes, I mean, there's a lot of good, but sometimes there are like bad things about it also. So I want to get into the brain computer interfaces. I mean, but I
Yeah.
would still kind of open
Yeah.
up the spatial computing space, because there's a lot of exciting things happening in the space of spatial computing. And recently you were the judge at MIT Reality Hack for spatial computing. So I'm sure you must have encountered some really, really impressive projects, students, startups, ideas. Will be great if you can give us an overview of your experience, what you encountered, some, and maybe some interesting novel use cases by these students at the MIT Reality Hack.
It was definitely a very interesting hackathon. It's like one of the biggest AR VR hackathons that ever takes place, and it takes place every year. And yeah, I was really honored that I got to be like a judge at this, and like seeing what all these people came up with. It was really exciting. Like, yeah, there were a lot of cool projects. What I realized was this, like, I've been to a lot of AR/VR hackathons, mostly as a participant, but this was my first time going as a judge, and this was after a while, I would say, after like 2 or 3 years of attending any hackathons. And then what I realized was most of the project, like all of no, yeah, most I would say most of the projects had some sort of AI built in it. There was this one project in VR where they built a project to help like movie directors like direct a scene or something like that. Like, or I don't know if it's the directors who direct a scene or like someone else, but it was to help these people direct a scene, like to create a storyboard of sort. And you could create this in mixed reality. It was in the Quest 3. And you basically, so suppose if a scene involved a bike, you say, like, I want a model of a bike here. And you say that through like, and there's a speech to text engine which converts that into text. And then there's a 3D model engine. I forgot the names of the APIs they were using, but like it was an AI 3D model generator or something, and it would take this text, generate a 3D model of a bike, and then it would place the bike like where you wanted it to, and you could move the bike around and stuff. And then you would, if when you're creating the storyboard, you would press start, and then you would like move the bike around to the new place. And like, yeah, like sort of directing a scene, like, okay, so the bike is in the next frame, the bike is now here. And then I want like two trucks with a man on top of it. And then the 3D model generator thing generates that. And I think that was really cool. Like, Like before, like back in when I was like developing XR apps, there was no like AI 3D model generator. You had to go to like Turbo Square, you had to go to Sketchfab, you had to look for like every time you filter by free, like always select the free models because these models were so expensive. Now you can just like tell it and it generates a 3D model for you. I thought that was like really cool. And there were also like other like IoT related projects. Like there was this like there was this plant, and this was also a mixed reality project. That's one thing I realized, that these new headsets have like given rise to this new sort of applications with mixed reality now, which was not possible before. Like no one had the like it was not that affordable, right? Like pass through mixed reality like a few couple of years ago. And so this is also a mixed reality project where you're looking at a real world plant, and it was sort of like a sort of like an entertainment project. So it has a moisture sensor in the soil, and when every time you water the plant, the moisture sensor detects the moisture, and then it sort of draws like a smiley face on the plant, and you see that through the virtual content. And I thought that was like kind of cool. And you can, so they develop also, like if you want to give the plant like a sad face, like you can say something mean to the plant, and it would again, the speech to text engine would do its thing, take that text, give it to a semantic engine. A semantic engine would infer if this is a good thing, a bad thing, or like if it was a mean thing. If it was a mean thing, then the plant would make like a sad face. And yeah, I thought that was like really cool, and like sort of you're like sort of like talking to the plant. Like I mean, it's a living thing, but we could never do that before, right? Like, and these technologies are sort of enabling that. I thought that was also really cool.
Lovely. How cool is that? I think, globally, I think world over, I think people are pushing the possibilities of building these things. Sometimes, I mean, you gave an example of, the students kind of building like a text to speech, or like a 3D engine altogether. Yes, I mean, it's so awesome that we've gotten into the world where anybody becomes a designer. And it's a democratization. But I also think about that other part because, earlier it was a complete process, that you had to get in these 3D artists who would sit down and through these 3D engines, take like couple of days to, build these 3D assets. And today, voila, here it is,
Yeah,
you put in some
yeah,
prompts and you get a 3D asset. Now, at the
yeah,
rate at which this technology is accelerating, when does it actually become consumable across different engines, where you can have high poly, low poly assets, and you can take it to any engines. I mean, I think it'll become a game changer. While it becomes a game changer, it also disrupts those so many artists. And I'm sure AI is going to progressively eat up into one piece of work to another. So it's gradually taking these steps. As much as we are getting excited, because it's exciting, because I guess us humans, we have forever thrived on creating innovation. So here we are creating innovation. But the first time, I think, in human history, we've come to a point where we are creating innovation that is going to truly disrupt mankind. Because automation has been going out through the years. When it
yeah,
was horse carts, then and these cars came in, and horses were completely disrupted. But it was okay. But I think first time in human history, we need to pause and understand what this really means. Because as much as it's exciting that, oh wow, I mean, a kid today can build an application where you can just speak out what you want and you get a 3D asset. But that
yeah,
also, I mean, disrupts so many people who used to be 3D professionals. And
yeah,
and what
exactly.
yeah, what would that mean? Like when you scale that up, I mean, the same thing's happening with code. There are these code pilots which
Yes.
which does your complete code cleanup, and can not just do a cleanup, can actually write a code right from scratch.
Recently, there was this, I don't know if you caught this, but Cognition Labs, they released
Devin,
this DevOps.
yeah,
Devin, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Like it's an entire like software engineer. Like you can ask it to build a website, copy some other website's design, and like you talk to it like you're talking to a software engineer, right? And then it'll build that entirely everything for you. It's a complete all in. It's like a totally autonomous agent. You don't have to do anything. You don't have need to have any programming skills, nothing. And that happened like so quickly. And yeah, it's growing really fast and it's growing at a very non-linear scale.
Truly, exactly, non-linear scale. So I'm excited for the human innovation and the possibilities of what it can unfold when it gets democratized, where everybody can code. But I'm
Yeah.
also thinking that we need to collectively take a pause and say, okay, this will lead to so much automation, so much job loss. How do we solve that problem? But I think the powers that be, there's the politicians and the institutions, are so consumed in building or excited about the possibilities of this technology. I don't think we're having a conversation about what could be the deeper impact of those true automation once it starts scaling, and it's already scaling. So, okay, I want to transition to like the world, which is not just those two senses, because so far with AR, VR, it's managed to emulate sight and sound, but now we are getting into emulating your touch, smell, and taste. So and you've been part of a company called Afference, where you've interned, where you built a neurostimulation based haptic wearable device which
Yeah.
can simulate your rain and lasers and touch and stuff like that. Will be great if you
Yeah.
could you talk about what you've built and
Definitely. So yeah, I did an internship with our friends in summer of 23. I see this job opening on LinkedIn. It said wearable research scientist, something like that. And the job was posted in Boulder, Colorado, which is where I live. And the company is like called Afference. And like, okay, this I've never heard of this company, like wearable research scientist. Like, what does this company do? I was like very intrigued. And this was on like Friday, I think mid-afternoon or something. And then yeah, I click on that website and I was just like blown away by their technology and what they were claiming that it could do. Like, because no one else is doing this, and I don't know why no one else was doing this. Like this seems so obvious. Like now that I've gone through this website's page, uh, and I was so excited, I immediately emailed Jacob, who's the CEO of Reference. His email was on the website, I think, and then he replied to me on Monday. This was 2 days before, he was like, yeah, this your resume seems very interesting. Like, let's get on a call. And we got on a call that Monday itself. And during we just like spoke. I spoke about my projects and like I asked about our friends, the company, and all that stuff. And like, yeah, on that Monday, he gives me the job, and like in that on that call itself. And and yeah, by before that deadline, I now have I secured a summer internship. So that was a really crazy experience. Okay, so coming to Afference, what they actually do, right? So like there are like tons of haptic companies out there, like for AR, VR, like Haptics, or like Ultraleap, which does the ultrasound haptics. So like, but most of the haptic companies, they're building like this clunky glove, which has like actuators inside or like physical motors or some sort of hardware, some sort of like clunky physical thing. So what Afference was doing was they were using neurostimulation to stimulate your nerves, which then send a signal to your brain to let the brain know that your nerves have detected that something is like a touch event. I thought that was so cool. This is like the epitome of first principles thinking, right? Like why would you build like all this physical hardware and all that, whereas you can just simply send a current, like an electric current to your nerves, and that would signal your brain that there's been a touch or a haptic event. And I thought that was really cool. And the biggest advantage of that was that you just needed like a ring around your finger. You don't need like all this clunky hardware. And yeah, that was really cool. And I got to like try out it's called the Phantom. The product is called the Phantom. I got to try out the Phantom, and it was really cool. And during the my summer internship, I had the opportunity to like build various apps for it. We were trying to build a mobile AR application wherein you could put on the Phantom and experience these different demos. So it was like if someone wanted to try the Phantom very quickly. So we did not have any products yet. It was still an early stage startup. There were no like dev kits released or anything. So like we were experimenting with like it was still in the prototype stage, and we put on like where you put it on and you would experience that was sort of the idea, like to quickly put it on and experience all these cool demos. So like I built like this mobile AR app with three different demos. Like the first one was like a laser where you like point point somewhere and then you press a button on the phone and then a laser shoots out of your hand, and you can feel that haptic shooting out of your hand. And it was not just like a vibration; you could actually feel the haptic moving from the base to the end tip of your finger. So you could feel that current moving through it. It was really cool. And like there was also we had another application called Rain. You would put your hand out, and there would be like an AR cloud which starts pouring rain on your hand, and you could feel the rain droplets hitting your hand. That was also really cool. And the third one was like a baseball application where you just put your hand out and you press the button on the phone, and a baseball comes and lands in your hand. And you could feel the as soon as it lands in your hand, you get that touch event, like the phantom sends electrical signals to the nerve endings in all five fingers, and you could feel the baseball. Like you would feel like something fell in your hand. And yeah, I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I think Apprentice is a great company. I think they're gonna go places.
Insane. So yes, I think I've spoken to quite a lot of haptic feedback companies building out these haptic gloves, haptic body suits, and so on and so forth. And I think, yeah, I think we need to, simplify things, like you rightfully pointed out. From the first principles thinking, but I still do not get it. I mean, does the ring uh, has some kind of, gives you some kind of electrical signals which kind of activates a certain, and that's the reason or is it like a glove? So because I've seen this, I think Facebook's been working on the same principle where you kind of, these through these controllers where it captures your signals, your nerve signals, nerve ending signals, and through which you are able to control. So will you be able to kind of elaborate this, because would love to have a conversation with somebody from Afference, because innovation in the possible way.
Yeah, so Jacob is the CEO and Dustin is the CTO. So to give you a bit of background how this technology evolved, right? Like, what is the story of Afference? So Dustin, he works at Case Western Reserve University, and he was researching neuro rehabilitation. That is like people with disabilities who lost their limbs. If they were to wear a bionic arm, how could they feel what the bionic arm is feeling, right? And so that's where the neuroscience aspect, that's where this afferents evolved from. They were basically like when they wore the bionic arm, the arm was had leads attached to the other end of the arm, like to the other end of the biological arm. And whenever the bionic arm touched something, it would send an electrical signal to the biological arm nerve endings, and that would communicate to your brain that your bionic arm has touched something. So and like the people who the participants in this research, they were like, I can actually feel like I have a real arm there, like actually holding like this cup or something. And like, it was like they could actually feel like this phantom arm out there holding it. So that's that's where this research evolved from. It was made for like people with disabilities and with people with bionic arms, that it was made for them to feel the real world. And it sort of evolved into this haptic glove for XR. And I thought that was a really cool like overlap of sorts of technology. And yeah, so what's happening there? Yeah, you touched on the Facebook the acquisition of Control Labs, their device, the EMG device. So that primarily measures electrical activity, which is sent from your brain to your fingers. So it yeah. So that's measuring that has electrical leads also, like it's placed on your wrist and it's measuring the signals going to your fingers from your brain. So like when your fingers move, it can your brain is sending those signals, asking the fingers to move, right? So it's measuring those signals and like it's converting that into some sort of intent. Here, what afferents does is it's instead of capturing signals, instead of recording signals, it's sending signals to your fingers. So, and those signals, obviously, they have to travel back to the brain so the brain can make sense of what has just happened because all the computation is done in the brain. And that pathway in neuroscience is called the afferent pathway. And that's why the company is called afferents.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Super interesting. Would love to have a conversation with Jacob. I mean, in the podcast. Now, we touched upon virtual reality, which can simulate sight, sound, and haptic feedback, which can simulate touch. Then the smell and taste, and then in comes brain-computer interface. Because like I think there are so many movies which is like giving you uh, a glimpse of what the world would look like when we are truly able to understand our brain, like structurally and functionally. And there are various neurotech companies from Neuralink and Kernel who are
Yeah.
working on building these brain computer interfaces, these devices. You have done a master's thesis on which is titled Towards an Eye Brain Computer Interface. Would you like to talk about that and how do you see that evolving? What would be the applications through that?
So yeah, as I said, like when I came for my master's degree at CU, I wanted to work on brain-computer interfaces and primarily as like an interaction medium for XR. And so obviously I started like looking at the current existing BCI techniques. And there are like a bunch of them, like the SSVEP, which stands for steady state visually evoked potentials. What happens in SSVEP, I can give a very short description, is there are like these, let's say these buttons in front of you, and they're all flickering at a different frequency. So like let's say it's a keyboard, a virtual keyboard in front of you, and like the letter A flickers at 5 hertz. That means like it's flashing 5 times a second, and the letter B is flickering at 10 hertz. So well, what happens here is when you look at letter A, like all whatever you're seeing is processed in the occipital lobe of your brain, which is at the back of the head over here. And when you measure when you put an EEG electrode on there and you look at the signal, so EEG stands for electroencephalography. It measures the electrical activity in the brain. And when you measure that signal, the signal has the same frequency that uh, of of that flashing. So if you're looking at the letter A, which is flashing at 5 hertz, the signal that you measure at the back of your brain also has a frequency of 5 hertz. It's like it's so cool. Like, but so if you want to type out something, so you look at each letter and the classifier it's doing its thing, is seeing what frequency it is at, and it knows what frequency the keyboards are mapped to, and it performs a match. And okay, the user is selecting letter B, and you can type out a sentence. But the issue with this is that it takes a while. Like you look at something and it takes like 2 or 3 seconds to capture that frequency, make a match, and type out that letter, which is like painfully slow, I think. If you were like I mean I get it, like for disabled users, this is like really like beneficial because they don't have any other option, and like it really changes their world. But if you are a healthy user, like why would you adapt this BCI technique? Like whereas you can just get a keyboard, you can just like go and like point, push that button, or you could use that voice interface. So that's when like started looking at. I wanted to look at this other techniques that can help here, or like other brain signals that are not like other brain signals that can inform user intent like very quickly and does not cause this user frustration. And then I realized that what SSVP is doing is basically an eye tracker, right? Like, why would you use SSVP when it's basically saying like when you're looking, okay, so looking at letter A, okay, it's looking at letter B. I mean, eye tracker can also do that. Why would you also need like record EEG signals? And so I was like, okay, eye tracking is a very powerful technique. Let's start off from there. Let's start off from the eye tracker. So we now have this camera looking constantly at your eyes, and it knows where you're looking in this XR world, which button you're looking at, which button on the keyboard you're looking at. But there's this problem of the Midas touch, right? If you're looking at something, the computer cannot tell whether you want to select it or not. You have to sort of, it knows you're looking at the button, but it does not know what you want to do with the button. You have to sort of give it a confirmation trigger. Like there should be an additional switch. And that's what the Apple Vision Pro does, the gaze and pinch technique. You look at a button and you do a pinch with your fingers, and it selects the target button for you. And there are also other ways to do it. There's like eye blinks. There's like there was a paper called Gaze and Tongue, which used the tongue-based interface to perform that click. So here your eyes are acting as a mouse cursor. You're moving the mouse cursor along the screen, and the finger tap is acting like as the click. But the confirmation trigger, there you're doing something, you're doing an additional physical action, which I felt was kind of not complementary to the seamless nature of gaze pointing. So, and I was like, maybe we can use something, maybe you can use something else here to inform the computer that you want to select this button, something that does not require like deliberate physical effort from the user. And that's when I mean, it was kind of obvious that BCIs are the obvious choice here, because your brain knows already that you want to select it or not. It's just how do you communicate it to the computer? And like I was like, yeah, there has to be some sort of brain signal that happens as soon as you look at this button that is informing that knows your intent, right? There has to be some sort of signal. And that's when I stumbled upon this SPN. It's called the stimulus preceding negativity. And the stimulus preceding negativity, it's not actually an intent indicator. It's not indicating that the user wants to select this button, but it's sort of a wrapper. It's what it actually does is, if your brain knows that there's a future stimulus that's gonna happen, it quiets down the neural activity. It's a preparatory mechanism. So it quiets down the neural activity because it knows there's a future stimulus coming, and it needs to make room to process that stimulus. You might ask, like, how does this inform intent? So when, let's say, like, you want to select a button in XR, or not even XR, let's just like open your phone app on your iPhone or whatever. And when you tap a digit, there's sort of a visual cue, right? There's a visual stimulus. It becomes darker, or it like changes, there's a slight change in color, and then it goes back to the normal state. So that's a stimulus. So that stimulus, before the stimulus happens, your brain quiets down the neural activity. So if you were now let's come back to the button in XR. If you were looking at a button, and if you wanted to select it, so you're kind of anticipating a stimulus response from that button, right? But if you don't want to select it, you're not going to anticipate a stimulus response because you don't want to select that button. So And so if you want to select that button and you're anticipating a stimulus response from it, your brain evokes an SPN because it quiets down the neural activity because it knows a stimulus response coming because the user wants to select it. And this presence of SPN detected in the occipital lobe through EEG signal informs informs the computer of the user's intent that they want to select the button. If the SPN was absent, that means they did not want to select the button. And this happens so fast. And the how it works is there's an eye tracker, it's tracking your eyes. When you look at a button, the eye tracker knows you're looking at the button and then tells the EEG, okay, detect this user's brain waves, like starting from now. And if the brain waves are going down, showing a negative dip in the EEG signal, that's the SPN. And then the EEG says, yeah, there's an SPN present, select the button. And the system would select the button for you. And my master's thesis basically showed that this works. It's still in early stage research. It showed that this technique works in the SPN has the potential to distinguish between these two states, between like whether user wants to select or the user does not want to select. It definitely does not work in real time. We haven't tested it. We're not there yet, but we're working towards that. But yeah, we found that the SPN has this potential. It's an implicit switch, basically. It's replacing that finger tap that you do with your fingers in the Vision Pro. And I thought that was really cool because there's no effort required from the user. The user does not even know this is happening. Like the user just looks at the button and they know they want to select it, but they don't have to do anything to communicate that to the computer. The EEG is they're detecting it on its own. They're not aware of this negative wave that's happening at the back of the brain, right? So like it's super implicit, it's effortless, it's seamless. Yeah. And yeah, we had like two major hypotheses. And our first hypothesis was whether the SPN can distinguish between these two states. And that was, yes, we did that. But the second hypothesis was we had to address this confound that, okay, is this SPN happening because the button did not present like a stimulus response, or was it because of the lack of user anticipation? And so that was a confound. And I'll actually have to explain the user study to make sense of this confound that we did, how we actually detected the SPN. So we had a task in VR where users, so it was called a selection task and a counting task. So the selection task is where users selected different targets. They had a number. They were basically 3D floating spheres in 3D space. And each of these targets had a number, like numbered 1 to 15. And they have to select these targets in ascending order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 15. And how the selection is done is through the dwell time technique. We use the HP Reverb Omnicept edition, which had an inbuilt eye tracker in it. And the users are looking at target 1. After 750 milliseconds, which was the dwell timer, the target gets selected. And the target turns from blue to green, like a bright green color, indicating a successful selection. And that was the stimulus that the user anticipates. So the user selected targets in the in the selection task, and we had a control task. So how can we measure that? How can we tell that the SPN is absent in a condition where they're looking at these targets, but they don't have any intention to select it? So we came up with this counting task. So each target has like tiny dots surrounding it. Like it's a random number of tiny dots surrounding the target. And what you have to do is find targets with specific number of dots surrounding it. So let's say find targets with 5 dots surrounding it. And then the user has to look at each target and they're counting the number of dots surrounding it. and they're doing this mental arithmetic operation, but there's no intent to select the target. They're looking at these targets, but they're observing it. They're not selecting it. So that was our control condition. And so, yeah, those were two conditions. And we saw that in this one, when they were selecting targets, that there was a negative dip in the EEG signal. When they were just passively observing it, there was no dip in the EEG signal. And also in this condition, the targets did not turn green. They were just blue because the user did not have an anticipation. The user were not trying to select the target, so it did not turn green. Whereas in this round, where they were actively selecting the targets turned green.
User experience.
Back to our second hypothesis, the confound was, so if this target is not turning green, how do you know that the SPN absent in this condition is because of the lack of users' intention to select the target, or was it the lack of the stimulus itself? Because two things are switched off in this condition. The target does not turn green, and the user does not have the intention to select it. So we came up with an additional third condition where the target turns green even in the counting task. So the user does not have an intention to select. They're doing the counting task. They're looking at the target, but the target turns green after 750 milliseconds. So this was basically to see if the SPN was absent or present in this condition. Our hypothesis was that the SPN would be absent in this condition also. And yeah, that was what we found. The SPN was absent, even if the target turned green, because they did not have an intention to select that target. Those were our two hypotheses.
So my last question, since we're running short on time, now we are figuring out these interactions, with these brain-computer interfaces. Obviously we're gonna get into a world where we will be using, rather these controllers, we'll be using a mind. And there are these already works such as master theses, which points us towards that possibilities, that open BCI's VR, etc., Project Galia, and there's so many others who kind of tinkering around what could be those possibilities. Could you paint a picture of what the world could look like in the next 10 years when these tech stack converges? Virtual reality with brain-computer interfaces.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really cool. Like, people are just going to be interacting with stuff just using their minds. I think it probably won't happen in the next 10 years. I think this maybe more like a 20-year thing where people are interacting with computers using their minds, and they're already the rise of LLM that can definitely help type out sentences. It's already done that. It's improved BCI based keyboard typing through the use of LLMs because it can generate the word sentences for you. I think, yeah, that will definitely help. And I think before even we get to fully fledged BCIs, non-invasive BCIs, I think there's going to be other other applications that are going to become mainstream. You've seen already these hearables that are happening. The company Neurable has this product which measures your attention, your focus, and gives you this neurofeedback of whether you're focused or whether you need to take a break and things like that. I think those are going to become mainstream first before we use BCI for intent detection. And yeah, Apple also has a patent. They're also working towards this. They integrated EEG into their AirPods, which I thought was pretty cool. If we can detect those signals in, I had this thought, what if you could actually detect SPN through your EEG-enabled AirPods? I thought that would be pretty cool. The user does not have to put on any additional accessory or a BCI of sort. And they can interact with computers using just AirPods. I thought, yeah, that seemed pretty cool. And yeah, I think it's definitely gonna take a while to get there, especially because BCIs, they don't have 100% classification accuracy rate, right? There's always going to be user frustration. And if BCI, I think the moment when BCIs actually replace everything else is when the user can do whatever they were already doing they can do it better with BCI. And until then, it's not going to replace the keyboard or the controllers or like eye tracking or the gaze and pinch technique. So I think that's what we need to strive for. And that's what it's going to take for the healthy user to adopt BCI.
Right. Raj, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. I think we're sitting in a fantastic point of time where we're just tinkering around with these possibilities, how the human computer interactions is going to change, and how we're going to transition from a 2D world to a 3D world, because so far all our interfaces are flat, and I think with these head wearable devices, we're going to break out and get into a 3D world, where then the interaction starts. I mean, you will be able to tinker around with how you interact itself, so I think exciting space. Thank you for sharing your insight. Wish you the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. And until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Raj. Really appreciate this.
Thank you, Eddie.